Let's start then. Well, hi guys, welcome to a new meetup from the Google Cloud series. We have a special guest from London, Niraj, who is a big data expert, and he can introduce us in the world of Apache and Spark. Niraj.
Hey, thanks for the introduction. So, hello everybody. Very warm welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining for this particular session. Let me just quickly share my screen, and then maybe I can introduce myself as well. So, just give me a moment. Let me see if I can share my screen.
It should be a button on the
Yeah.
bottom or on the top if you move the mouse.
Yeah, I got that. So, okay. So let me know if you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, great. So a warm welcome to everybody. In this particular session, we're going to discuss about the data analysis using Apache Spark on the GCP platform, which is the Google Cloud platform. So myself, Neeraj, I'm working as a data scientist at the Expedia Group. I have more than a decade of experience and currently focusing on the machine learning and the data science aspect of the data, and like majorly working with the technologies like big data and like Spark, Hadoop, and these technologies I'm currently focusing more on. These are my LinkedIn and the Medium profile. I used to post some of the blogs on the Apache Spark. So if you're interested, probably you can follow me on the Medium, and you can find some of the blogs published by me over there. Maybe at the end of the session, I maybe would like to highlight some of the blogs which you might be interested in. Now, in this particular session, we're going to discuss about what exactly Apache Spark is, what are the different components, what we have in Spark, the architecture of Spark, and then the anatomy of the Spark job, and we'll talk about the GCP setup, that what we will going to discuss, what we're going to rather use in this particular session to run our Spark loads or to understand the Spark. Okay, and then finally, we have a demo, and that will be more extensive and exhaustive, where I'm going to discuss how we can use this Spark and how we can do some basic data analysis using Apache Spark, working with the various data sources it supports. Now, first of all, what is Apache Spark? So it was initially started as UC Berkeley somewhere in 2009 as a project. It's a very fast and general purpose computing system. Now, why it is called as a fast? Because it provides the in-memory computing capability. It will try to keep the data as much as it can into the memory. And why it says a general purpose cluster computing system is something we'll discuss in next few slides, where we'll discuss the architecture, and then I'll talk about why we say it's a general purpose. At the end, we could see that it's a computing system. So in the Hadoop ecosystem, Apache Spark is a compute component, or we can say that it's an analytical engine within the Hadoop ecosystem, because it only provides us the computational capabilities. It won't provide any sort of storage. In order to store the data, we need some sort of other storage. For example, we can keep our data on HDFS, stands for Hadoop Distributed File System. We can keep our data on, let's say, the blob storage or the buckets, what we have in the different cloud providers, for example, GCS in case of Google. We can keep the data on as a Hive tables, or we can keep the data on any other sources which is supported by Spark. This is most popular for running the iterative machine learning algorithms because of the fact that machine learning algorithms are mostly iterative in nature. And since Spark will try to keep the data as much as it can into the memory, which means that the integration or the interaction with the disk will be minimal. And that makes the iterative problem or the iterative machine learning algorithms very fast because it will try to keep the data in memory. Now, it provides various high-level APIs such as Java, Scala, Python, R, and SQL, which means even if we are comfortable with any one of the language, be it a Scala, Python, or Java, we can use Spark framework. For example, even if we are not familiar with any one of the language like Java, Scala, Python, or R, we can still leverage the expertise or the capabilities of the Spark via SQL API, which means we can simply write some of the SQL queries, and behind the scene, the Spark job will be running. So the idea is, even if we are not familiar with any one of the language, we can still use Spark and take the capabilities of the Spark or use the capabilities of the Spark. It is very well integrated with the Hadoop and its ecosystem. Now, if I talk about the important components within the Spark, so it works in a master-slave architecture where your driver is your master and workers are called as slaves in this particular architecture. We could see there is something called as a Spark context which is running inside the driver. Now, this Spark context is basically the starting point of our Spark application. So when we submit a Spark application, it will be submitted to the driver, and then this Spark context that will distribute the work among the different nodes using the cluster manager. Now, the purpose of the cluster manager is managing the different resources what we have into the Spark cluster. The cluster manager could be a standalone cluster manager which comes with the Spark. It could be Yarn, which stands for the yet another resource negotiator, or it could be Mesos. So we have the different cluster managers which we can use. This is how the architecture of Spark looks like. So at the bottom, we have Apache Spark, or sometimes we also call it as a Spark core. And on the top of that, we have Spark SQL, which provides the SQL-like capabilities. So for example, if you would like to do an analysis on the structured data, we can use Spark SQL. And this is the API which definitely we're going to use in today's session to see how we can do the data analysis. Then we have the graphics. So using this library, we can analyze the graph like data. Now, if I simply define the graph, it's a collection of edges and the nodes. That's what we call it a graph. Then the machine learning. So it provides the machine learning module in which we have a lot of machine learning algorithms already built in, and we can leverage to solve the machine learning problems, or we can use the machine learning module to build the various machine learning modules. And finally, we have the streaming API, streaming module, which helps us to do a real-time analysis of the data. Now, it's not that we can use only one module at a time. However, we can integrate multiple modules. We can use multiple modules together to build a Spark application. For example, you have some batch data which presents on some sort of persistent storage, or you have some incoming data. So you can read your streaming data using the streaming module, and you can simultaneously read the batch data from the Spark SQL. If you would like, you can join those two data. And once you have joined the data, you have extracted what we are looking for, then you can build the machine learning models on the top of it. So the idea is you can use multiple modules into a single Spark application. In this demo, we will going to focus on the Spark SQL, which is basically used for the data analysis. Now, we talked about that the Spark is a general purpose computing engine. Now, why we say general purpose? Because this entire piece is called as a Spark, and we could see with this Spark, we can analyze the structured data, streaming data, even the unstructured data. We can build the machine learning module. We can analyze or we can process the graph-like data. So that's why we call it as a general purpose computing engine. Okay. Now, this is how the anatomy of the job looks like. So when you submit a Spark code, it will be a Spark application. Now, that Spark application will be divided further into a Spark jobs based on the different transformations and actions what we have. And then a particular job will be divided into a different stages. And the stage is further divided into a different task, which is the granular component, which will be executed onto the worker node. This is how the anatomy of the Spark job looks like. Now, this is the GCP setup we will going to use in today's session. So we will going to use some of the services like Dataproc, which is the managed Spark and Hadoop service provided by GCP. Then we will going to use the Google Cloud Storage, which is the storage, blob storage provided by GCP, where we will keep our data and we will read the data from our GCS bucket. And in order to work with the Spark in this particular session, we will going to use the Jupyter notebooks, which is readily available into the Dataproc itself. Okay. So now this will be more or less the setup we're going to use. Now, let's quickly jump onto the demo. So let me just stop sharing this screen and let me just share my another screen. So, okay. So I hope you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Now, first of all, let me show you the architecture of the cluster. So I have already created this Dataproc cluster, and the name of the cluster is Spark in this particular case. And I have created in this particular region, US Central 1. I have chosen only 2 workers for the demo purpose. Now, if I click on this particular cluster, you could see a lot of information. So you could see the yarn. So this basically uses the yarn as a cluster manager. And if you have any jobs running, you can see there the VM instances. So you could see we have 3 VM instances. 1 is the master and 2 are the workers because we have selected the 2 workers. Here you could find the different configuration what we have used in order to create this. But the important is this web interface. Now, it provides a lot of different web interfaces, but we will going to focus on this particular one, which is Jupyter. Okay. So when you work with the Spark, there are certain notebooks which you can use like the Jupyter or the Zeppelin. We can also use the console as well. However, we would like to use the Jupyter in this particular session. Why Jupyter? Because in order to discuss the Spark, we will going to use the Python API, and Jupyter notebooks are the very which is being used for the Python. So that's why we will going to use the Jupyter notebooks. Now, this is my notebook. So now, before I deep dive into the data analysis, let me try to define certain terms. First, it's a data frame. Now, data frame is similar to a relational table. So it's logically a relational table where we have our structured data, and on the top of that, we have the header. Spark SQL is the module provided by Spark to process the structured data. And the Spark session, so currently we are using 2.x, or specifically we are using 2.4 in this particular session. However, prior to 2.x, we used to have the different context for the different purpose. We used to have the Spark context to work with the certain type of Spark loads. We used to have the SQL context to work with the Spark SQL. We used to have the Hive context to work with the Hive tables. But 2.x onwards, they have unified the different context into a single context called as a Spark session. So this will be the starting point of our Spark application. Now, here, what I will going to do is, I will going to load some of the libraries which we will going to use throughout this particular session. Now, this is the Jupyter Notebook interface, those who haven't seen this before. Now, this is basically a code cell where you can write your code, you can execute, and these are some of the markdown cells where you can write your text. Now, in order to execute, either you can click on run, or you can say shift enter as a shortcut. Okay, so now I have executed this and I have loaded the libraries. Next, I will create the Spark session because that will be the starting point of our Spark application. So I have created the Spark session. Now here I'm going to enable some flag, and that will just help me to display the content in a better manner. Okay, so when I will going to display my data frame in a tabular format, this will just help me to display in a nicer manner. When I will going to display, I will let you know that what I meant by the nicer manner. I can demonstrate that. So it's just a flag which I have enabled. Now, first of all, in order to create the data frame, what I will going to do is, I will read some dummy data. I will read some data from a CSV file, and that particular CSV file is present on my bucket, on my GCS bucket. And let's say this is the path for my CSV file. Okay, now how I can read the CSV file and create a data frame? So this is a Spark session which we have created at the top. Then we have the read, which will provide us the Spark reader, and we have the CSV function. Inside that, we can specify the path of the CSV file and the few other arguments. So here I have specified that the header is equals to true because I have the header in my CSV file, and this, but the delimiter in this particular CSV file, or the separator in this particular CSV file, is pipe. So that's how I have specified the separator as a pipe. By default, it's comma. Okay, and what I will do is, similarly, I am reading another CSV file with the header true and the separator pipe. So let me execute this. Now, this has been executed. So let me first of all display the content of the data frame and see how it looks like. Okay, now with Spark, we have a native function called as a show, which will show you the content of the data frame onto the screen or in the notebook or the console, whatever interface we are using. So this is how my data frame looks like. So I have 4 columns named as ID, name, department, and salary. And this is some of the data what we have. Okay, now this is how the show function display the data. However, the flag which I have enabled, that will help me to display the data in this manner, which is a little neater and little nicer. So this is specific to the Jupyter notebooks. However, if you're using, let's say, the Zeppelin notebooks, it has its own implementation of some display function or the show function. If you're using the Databricks notebooks, they have their own implementation of displaying the data. But that's just a matter of displaying the things in a different interfaces. Now, we have read the CSV file and created a data frame. Now, let's try to perform certain operation on this particular data frame. So first of all, let's say I would like to count the number of records in this particular data frame. Here, this is very small, and we could see that we only have 10 records. However, in order to display the content, if you would like to control the number of records, you can specify the number here 4, and it will only show the top 4 records. Okay, so even if you have, and by default, it will only display 20 records. So even if you have read a very large CSV file, or you have created a very large data frame, if you display, it will only show top 20 records by default. However, the number of records you can tweak by specifying the number in the show function. So first of all, let's see how we can count the number of records. So this is how we can say we have the 10 records in this particular data frame. Now, if we would like to know what are the different columns available for this particular data frame, then we have something called as a columns, and we can say we have 4 columns named as the ID, name, salary, and department. Okay. Now, along with the name of the columns, if you would like to check the data types of the column, we have something called as the D types, and we can say we can get the data type of the columns as well, like, and here we could see all of the data types are string. That's because we have read the data from the CSV. So whenever we read the data from the CSV, it will keep all the columns as a string. Okay. Now, let's check how Spark will store the schema internally. Because we have read the CSV file, we haven't specified the schema. It has read the schema automatically. And here, this is how Spark will store the schema behind the scene. So here, we could see this is a struct type. So if I talk about the schema, which is this, if I talk about the schema, I can say schema is nothing but a collection of attributes. Okay. So this entire schema will be represented by the struct type class, and the individual field will be represented by struct field class. Okay. So this is a struct type, and this struct type class will be used to define the entire schema. And what is schema? It's a collection of attributes. It's a list of attributes, and each attribute is defined by the struct field class. So you could see this is the name of your column, which is ID. This is the data type of the column, which is string. And the third argument represents the nullability, whether the column can be null or not. So this is how Spark will store the schema. Now let's say at any point of time, we would like to display the schema in the hierarchical manner for a better interpretation. So you have something called as a print schema, where you can print the schema for your data. Now, all the columns are string. However, we know that this is not the correct representation. So we have something called as the infer schema, and by default it is false. So when we say infer schema is equals to true, what this will do is this will infer the schema automatically from the CSV file. And now let's check the schema, and we could see the ID and salary are an integer, which is as expected. So this is how you can specify that you would like to infer the schema, and it will infer the schema automatically. However, there are ways by which you can specify the schema explicitly as well, by creating the schema by explicitly or manually using the struct field and the struct type. Now, so we have read the data, and this is basically the link I have kept in the notebook, where you can find lot more different type of arguments you can use with the CSV file, because we have a lot of other arguments which we can provide. Let me just quickly show you this. So in the CSV, you can specify the path for your CSV file which you have used. You can specify the schema, the separator, the different type of encoding, how you would like to use the codes, escape characters, if you would like to include the ignore the trailing white spaces, leading white spaces, and so on. So it provides a lot of different other arguments which you can use to read the CSV file. Okay. Now let's say how we can analyze our data. So let's say we would like to select particular columns. So we have a function called as a select, which can help us to select a particular column, and you can specify the column name of the columns inside the select function. So we have only selected the few columns. Similarly, if you would like to filter a particular column, so you can specify the condition within the filter function. So let's say we would like to only filter, only get the records where the ID is equals to 1. So you can say empdf ID, which refer to the ID column equal to 1. So this will only return the record where the ID is equals to 1. Now one point to note here is we are using the Python API. That's why we are using double equal to. If you're planning to use the SQL, if you're planning to use the Scala API, it will be triple equal to. So just a word of caution and the point to note here. Now, let's say if you would like to drop a particular column, then you have something called as a drop. And what that will do is that will drop a particular column. So we have dropped the ID, and now you could see you have only 3 columns. However, data frames are immutable in nature, which means you cannot change the content of the data frame. For example, if you check the content of the EMPDF, this particular EMPDF still contains the column ID because it's immutable in nature. However, when you drop, it will create another data frame which you need to keep it in a different reference because data frames are immutable in nature. Now, let's say we would like to perform certain aggregation. So let's say we would like to do a grouping based on the department. So what this will return is, this will return the group data, which is based on, which is grouped based on the department. Now, on this particular group data, you would like to perform certain aggregate function. Then you can use the aggregate function here, and you can perform various aggregations like count, sum, min, max, average, and so on. The advantage of using this aggregate function is you can perform multiple aggregation at once. Okay, let me display. Let me execute this. And now you could see for a particular department, we could see how many records do we have, what is the total salary for a particular department, min, max, and the average salary, and so on. So this is how we can group the data and we can perform the multiple aggregation at once using the aggregate function. Okay. Now, instead of grouping a data based on a particular column, if you would like to do a global aggregation, then you can simply use the aggregate function and then you can do aggregation. So what this will do is we are not grouping the data, we are performing the aggregate function on the entire data frame. So you could see we have the 10 columns. We have 10 columns. The sum of the total salary is this, the maximum is 8,000, minimum is 1,000, and so on. Okay. Now, if we would like to do a sorting, then we have something called a sort function, and we can specify the columns based on which we would like to do a sorting. Okay. Now, let's say first we would like to do a sorting based on the department column. So we can do something like this. So our data is sorted based on the department column. By default, it will be sorted based on the ascending order. However, if we want, we can sort the data based on the descending order as well. If we want to sort the data based on the multiple columns, so you can specify this as a list. Now the data is sorted based on the department column, and within the department, your data is sorted based on the salary. So for the department 1, the data is sorted based on the salary, which is 1,000, 1,100, 1,500, 3,000, and so on. Same is the case for the department 2 and department 3. Now, in order to control the ordering, we have a function called as a DESC in the functions module, which we have imported at the top. So here we are sorting the data based on the department. By default, it's in ascending order. And within a particular department, we are sorting the data based on the salary into the descending order. Now, if we could see, the data is sorted based on the department 1, department 2, and department 3. And within a particular department, our data is sorted based on the salary, that too in a descending order. Okay. Now, let's move on to create some derived columns. Now, for example, we have certain columns and we would like to create some derived columns based on the existing columns. So let's say I would like to create a column called as a bonus, and let's say the employer would like to give a bonus as a 10%. So how I can create a bonus column? So we have a function called as a with column, which creates a new column for us. This will be the name of the new column, and this is the expression of the new column value. Here, the name of the column is salary, and this is the call function, which will create a column object for that particular column. So basically, this refers to a column object, or this refers to a salary column. And what we are saying is multiply by 0.1. So that will give us a 10%. So now we could see we have got the bonus as a 10%. So in order to represent the column, either you can use the call function, or you can use the name of the data frame, and within the data frame, you can specify the name of the column in the square brackets, and that will work exactly the same. So these are just the different notations of referring to the column as well. Okay, so this is how we can create the derived column. Now, and if I show you, so we could see we have the bonus column as well. So now let's say we would like to see how we can perform the various type of joins. So we have the two data frames. One is the employee data frame, another one is the department data frame. And we would like to join these two data frames. So we say employee df dot join department df. And the second argument will be the condition based on which we would like to join our data. Okay. So now when I join these two data frames, this is how my data looks like. So I have joined the two data frames based on the department column in the EMPDF and the ID column in the department DF. So this is how my joined data looks like. Okay. We could see the record with the ID 10 is missing because obvious. Why? Because by default it performs the inner join. Okay, it performs the inner join. Now, if we would like to perform, let's say, the left outer join, then it works in a pretty similar manner. It's just that we need to specify the third argument, which is by default inner join. We can specify as a left outer join. So if I execute this, what it will do is it will perform a left outer join. So you will get all the records as per the inner join and rest of the records from the left side of the table and the null for the corresponding right side of the table. So this is how we can perform the left outer join. Similarly, we can perform the right outer join with the right outer string, and we can perform the full outer join with the outer string. So for the full outer join, you could see this is the record which is only present into the right side of the data, left side of the data frame. This is the record which only present into the right side of the data frame. And this is the result of the full outer join. So this is how you can perform the various type of joins. Now, we did quite a lot of transformations on the data. We read the data from the CSV file, which is present onto our GCS bucket. We did a lot of different transformations like select, filtering. We dropped some sort of tables. We did the sorting of our data. We created some other derived columns. We joined the multiple data frames, and we did the data analysis or whatever we wanted to do. Now, as we discussed in the first part, it won't provide any storage. We need to store the data somewhere. Now, at this point of time, we will say, let's store the data back to the GCS bucket. So what we will do is, we will save the data back to the GCS. So in order to save the data, let's say I will only keep the records, or I will only keep the top 5 records. I will create a data frame called as the empdf1, let's say. And then in order to save this data frame as a CSV file, what I can do is I can say empdf1.write and then say the CSV. Inside that, I can specify the path at which I would like to save this particular data as a CSV. I can specify the separator, I can specify the header, and I can specify the mode, which could be overwrite or append, depending on how you would like to save your data. Now, when I execute this particular data frame is saved on this particular location. Okay, so this is how we can read the CSV file, we can process the data, and we can save the data frame back to the CSV file. Now, let's say we would like to do the analysis using the SQL-like queries. So how we can do that? So let's say we have a data frame called as the EMPDF, which we have created at the top, and we can create a temporary view out of that particular data frame, and let's call this as a temp table. Okay, so what this line will do is this line will create a temporary view, and the name of the temporary view is temp_table. Then using the Spark session and the SQL method inside the Spark session, we can literally write a SQL-like query where select star from temp table, which we have created just above, where ID is equals to 1, and say show. So you could see we have created a temporary view and executed a SQL query on the top of that, and it absolutely returns a data frame. So the idea is, if you are not familiar with the data frame, you can still use the Spark API to do your data analysis. However, there are few points which I would like to mention based on my experience, that if you would like to do some ad hoc analysis, then definitely you can use the SQL queries. If you are familiar, you are master of SQL queries, then definitely you should use the SQL queries. However, if you are building a very large data pipelines, it might be difficult to build those pipelines using the SQL API. Even if you are master, you have built those pipelines into the SQL, that might be difficult for others to read. That's where I would recommend to use the data frame API, so that you can write your code into a small pieces and use, so that way you can also leverage the functional aspect of the data frame API. Okay, and another important point, there is absolutely no performance difference between the two modes. Even if you use the SQL API or the data frame API, there will be no difference into the performance, because under the hood, Spark executes the same piece of code. Okay, and definitely you can use the SQL and the data frame API interchangeably, depending on your convenience into the data pipeline. Now, so far we have discussed the SQL as a data source. Let me also discuss the Hive tables, which is basically a very important aspect while working with the Hadoop ecosystem. Okay, so let me show you how we can read and write the Hive tables. So there are some Hive tables which I have already created. Okay, in order to do that, let me show you that I have some Hive tables. So what I will do is, I will go to my master and I will SSH into the master. So just wait for a moment. The idea is, I would like to log into this. Okay, so I have logged into the master node, and let me just open the Hive shell. And the idea is, I would like to show that I have some Hive tables present in this particular. So I can say show tables, And we could see we have some tables like customer, customer underscore temp, and so on. So we have some tables available in Hive. Now what we will going to do is, just a moment. Okay, I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great, thanks. Now, so let's say I would like to read the customer table. So within the Spark session, we have a function called as a table, and inside that we can specify the name of the table. And here I'm just doing a limit 10 because I would only like to display the 10 records. And you could see this is how my data looks like. This is how my data looks like. And I'm using the display of the Jupyter notebook, which I have enabled a flag at the top. Why? If I use the show function, then you could see this is probably not the best way to see the data. And so that is the reason I have used this, because it looks much better. Okay, so I have read the Hive table, created the data frame. Now, once we create the data frame, we can perform the various operations what we discussed at the top. And once we are done with the data analysis, we have reached the final data frame. Then what we can do is we can save our data frame back to the Hive table. So let's say I have the customer data frame, which I would like to save again as a Hive table. So I can say name of the data frame dot write dot save as table. Inside that I can specify the name of the table, and I can say override because I would like to override the existing table. Now let me execute this. Now I've executed, I have overridden my table, which means that I have created this particular table just now. Now, how we can check? So I will write some metadata command, which is the DSC formatted name of the table, which will display the metadata for my table. So these are the columns, and the few important points to note here is the creation time. You could see this table, which we have created just now, July 14, and the time in UTC. So this is the table which we have created just now. Okay. Another important point to note here is the type of the table is managed. So you have the two types of table. One is the managed Hive table. Another one is the external Hive table. And the major difference between both of them is if you delete the managed Hive table, your underlying data will be deleted. If you delete the external table, your data will be there onto the storage. It's only the metadata will be deleted. So that's the difference. And by default, it will create the managed table. Okay. Now, let's say you would like to save your Hive data frame as a partition table. So how you can do that? It's pretty similar. You can say use the save as table, name of the data frame, mode, overwrite or append, whatever you would like to use. And then you can specify the partition by argument and specify the list of the columns based on which you would like to do a partitioning. So here I would like to do a partitioning based on, let's say, a birth year. So I have executed this. Now let me show you the DDL or the data definition language or the metadata to see if, so first of all, this table is created just now. Again, this is a managed table because by default it creates a managed table. And now we have the partition information as well, because this table is a partition table. And we could see the table is created, or the table is partitioned based on the birth year. Okay. Now, if I try to check the partitions, so I've only displayed 5. So here you could see these are some of the partitions for this particular table, which we have just created. And similarly, if we try to check the partitions for the table, which we have created at the top with only name underscore temp, which is basically not a partition table, but still we are trying to check the partitions for this, then definitely we are expecting this error that show partitions is not allowed on a table that is not partitioned. That is another way to demonstrate that the earlier table was not partitioned. So this is how you can read the Hive table. You can save your Hive table as a partition table or the non-partition table, and by default, it will create a managed Hive table. Now, finally, let's say if we would like to create an external table, the only difference is we need to specify the path explicitly where we would like to keep the data. Okay, if I do this, this will save my data frame with the name of the table customer_temp_ext. And if I try to demonstrate the metadata or the DDL definition, so the table is created just now. There is no partitioning information because we haven't created any partition table, and the type of the table is external because we have specified the path explicitly, and it has created an external table. Okay, now with that, I would like to conclude this particular presentation. However, I would like to demonstrate a couple of references. First of all, this is the official documentation which you can follow for the Spark SQL. And you can also follow some of the blogs which I have written. So for example, this particular blog is specifically focusing on the data frame API or the Spark SQL, what we discussed. So whatever the different operations which we discussed, all these operations are mentioned in this particular blog as well. However, there are a few other parts of this blog. So for example, if you would like to understand more about the foundation of Spark, you can go through this part 1, which talks about the architecture of Spark, what we discussed, the different transformation, and it talks about the RDD, which we haven't discussed in this, but it will be good to know because that is the foundation even to the data frames as well. And also, if you would like to know more about the advanced data frame operations, like how you can improve the performance of the join. So we have something called as a broadcast join, how we can use that, the different caching strategies or the functions, how we can use that, how we can write the SQL expressions, how we can write the UDFs, which is the user defined functions, and use it in Spark, how to work with the null values, how to partition or repartition the data, and at last the catalog API, which is basically the metadata API provided by Spark. And apart from that, there are few more blogs I would like to mention you might be interested in. So I'll just quickly show you. Okay, so these are some of the blogs which I think you might be interested in. So just give me a moment while it loads up. Okay, so this particular blogs talk about the various Spark window functions. So we have quite a lot of Spark window functions. And so what I did is I have categorized those window functions here. I took some dummy data and tried to explain each window functions with some examples. That way, I try to make this easy to understand how the different window functions works. Okay. This particular blog talks about how you can work with the JSON data. So how you can read the JSON data and how you can perform your data analysis using the JSON data. And the last one talks about the datetime function. So we have the various datetime functions available in Spark. And I have tried to cover almost all the datetime functions available till the time when I wrote this particular blog with some examples that makes it easy to understand, hopefully. And also with each blog, you can find at the bottom the GitHub link, which will be redirected you to the Jupyter notebooks available onto my GitHub page. So you can go to here Apache Spark and you can find the different notebooks corresponding to various blogs, what I have published. Okay. So with this, I would like to conclude this particular session. And if anybody have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer that. So any questions, any comments, thoughts, more than welcome.
Thank you, Niraj, very much. That was very enlightening. And indeed, please have some questions for Niraj. Anyone?
Okay, so I think
If
somebody's looking
I
for the
have,
link.
you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So in your presentation, you showed us that you can compute data based on tabular data, linear data. What about if you have a tree-like data? Let's say a task that has a list of tasks and so on. How do you do that?
So we have other data types in order to work with the complex data types. One is, let's say, if you have the array-like data type, or you have map-like data type. So there are certain other functions with which you can use that. And that's actually a very good question. So I have another blog which is coming up, which is actually not published yet, which will maybe published in a couple of days. So let me just quickly show you that, and that might help. Just give me a moment. Let me just try to pull that up, and that will hopefully answer your question. And meanwhile, I can say, if let's say you have the JSON data, so I have already shared, which is also a tree-like data. So you can use that particular blog to see how you can process the JSON data. But let me just quickly share my screen once again. So this is basically the blog, which is like in a draft, which is not yet published, but which will be published in a few days. So you could see what you're talking about is, let's say you have a data something like this, right, in a column, and how you can process this particular data. So we have the various array functions which you can use to process such data. Does that answer your question?
Partially, because as I saw there's a column with and the cell from that column contains an array of data. But if we have, let's say, like objectual data, we have a class that is animal and has some fields, and inside the animal class we have the cat class that has another field. So we want to I don't know, count all the cats from different superclasses. We want to have to make operations on subclasses.
Okay, I understood. So for that, you have a few functions. For example, you can specify using the dot operator. You can, let me just quickly, moment. Let me just quickly show you the JSON one that will probably answer that question. So just give me a moment. Okay. So okay, yeah. So for example, let's say what you're saying is you have read the data and this is how your data looks like. So you have some sort of, let's say, the batters class, and inside that you have the multiple batters. You have some sort of toppings, and inside that you have the multiple toppings. So you have the data in the hierarchical manner. So what you can do is, so for example, within the batters, if you would like to refer to a batter, then you can use somewhere, let's say, the dot operator, something like this. So within the batter, you can select all the columns, and you have a few other functions as well to flatten the data and so on. So you have different functions available with which you can play around with the nested or the hierarchical data as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Any other question?
Hey, hi Neeraj, Arun here.
Here.
Yep. I have a couple of questions. I do know that like Spark can handle deeply nested JSON data and stuff. I work with a lot of EDI data, so then they usually come into an XML format. How familiar or how you know easy it is to use Spark with XML kind of deeply nested XML where there are certain rows which are like deeply nested. So would you recommend Spark, on top of, because up until now I've been using Python,
Mhm.
and I've been making use of XML to dict and multiple flattening kind of writing list to dictionaries and all those stuff. So would you recommend Spark for doing such kind of operation, or is there any direct way which I can leverage using Spark?
So, I mean, first of all, I haven't got a chance to work with the XML data. However, I know that if I'm not wrong, as of now, and as per my understanding, we don't have any package which can handle the XML data readily the way we can handle the JSON data, CSV, Avro, Parquet, and other formats. However, I can show you, I can point you to this, which is basically the sparkpackages.org. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this.
Mm-hmm.
Here you can find the other packages which are contributed by the different, community, the different organization within the community. And I think there is an XML package available which you can use. So there are XML package which you can use, and if you go here, it demonstrates how you can use this particular XML package and how you can use it. And there are some blogs as well which you can refer. For example, so this is the Spark XML project which is contributed by Databricks, and I think
Mm-hmm.
some blogs as well which probably you can refer to see how it works. So, I mean, this is, I mean, if I would be in your place, this is something I would explore.
Yep, sure. Yep, thanks, Neeraj. The second question that I have is regarding, like overall CI/CD kind of an, setup. Mostly, I'm very much familiar with, like with Dockers and containers and, pushing code into like a Python code mostly that I have been doing up till now, and mostly on AWS and, very minimal exposure to, I would say, GCP. Like, how would you suggest, like, like, would it be Kubernetes, where you would push your Spark code? And, what are your suggestions, if I have to achieve a, similar CI/CD kind of a setup, if I have to push something with the GCP and Spark code?
So, I mean, Spark works pretty much I mean, it works very well with the GCP or the AWS or even in the standalone as well. So I believe whatever the CI/CD pipelines you are following on the AWS, you should be able to follow the same on the GCP as well. And it has a very nice support to the Kubernetes as well. So I think you should be good to use that.
Okay. Yep. I mean, I've been going through some of this because I mean, one of the reasons I was attending this meetup was, there was GCP in this, whole this setup. So I was going through some of this GCP like individual, services, including, cloud build and container repositories and everything. So I'm not, too much familiar with that. So I was just hoping, even if I adopt Spark, which I have been using, I wouldn't say like, as a like cheat method. So wherever I required, to process a huge amount of data, I would, quickly convert to Spark and, just leverage that and leave it as it is. But now with Spark as a unified platform, which I hear a lot these days with Databricks as well, I closely follow Databricks. So I was hoping that, maybe I could move most of my codes to Spark, so that I could achieve more flexibility. And also as an organizational process, like we are moving to GCP. So I was kind of, in that phase where I have to, shift a lot of things. So just was looking for, some kind of guidance.
No, absolutely, I can understand. And if you're only running the loads on the Python, I mean, I would strongly recommend to at least explore the Spark, because it provides the parallelism. It provides a very good APIs as well. And for example, last year they have released a project called as a Koalas. So if you have, let's say, the Pandas loads, so the Koalas is something which is like reducing the friction between the Pandas API in the Spark, and it is I mean, the syntax is very much similar to the Pandas API. So, I mean, there are different options which you can absolutely adopt. And as I demonstrate, like, even if somebody is not familiar with this, you can simply write the SQL queries and still leverage the capabilities of the Spark. And the good thing is you can write some of the ETLs in your Python. You can write some of the ETLs in SQL, even in the Scala, and like try to merge wherever you are comfortable and see the difference and the benefits.
Right. Just one, last silly question. I mean, a lot of these industries I've seen, whenever they move to Spark and everything, they also depend hugely on Scala. I have never worked on Scala. I don't, because I've never programmed in Java, and, I know that the base of it is kind of Java. So would it be like too much of a transition, doing everything with Python and just Spark, or Scala is like a kind of a requirement that you should know, to transition these things to this platform? What do you think?
So first of all, as I mentioned, it provides the different APIs. So even if you don't know the Scala, that's absolutely not a problem. You can use the Python API, and you could see if you follow my blogs, most of my blogs using the Python API of this. And even in this particular session, we only use the Python, not the Scala. So the first part is, yes, absolutely, you can use the Python without even knowing the Scala as well. The other thing is maybe Scala is also being used because most of the code is written in Scala for the Spark. Initially, when it was launched a few years back, yes, there was some difference between the capabilities and the performance. But with the data frame API onwards, the performance is absolutely same for the Scala and the Python API. And both the libraries are very rich. So yes, absolutely, you can go with the Python even if you don't know the Scala. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, Neeraj. Yeah, that was really informative. Yeah, thank you very much. Very helpful.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Ron.
Okay, I have two very quick questions. Besides Python and Scala, is also JavaScript. Is there a JavaScript API also available?
So, I mean, that is not natively available, I would say. But if there are any other ways which can be used, I mean, I'm not aware of. But natively, I think that is not available. However, if you are looking for, I mean, any other packages or any other things which is basically for Spark, I would say this is the best place to look for, because I mean, it contains the other modules or the other libraries which are not natively available, which but contributed by the community. So I would strongly look at this. So let me just paste this into the chat for the reference for everyone.
Okay, and the second question is, in order to set up a very quick environment on GCP, are there any costs associated for a simple, smaller configuration?
For the simple config, I mean, smaller configuration, I mean, first of all, I would suggest, I mean, if you're doing it for the personally, obviously Google provides a $300 credit, which I believe everybody know. And then obviously this Dataproc is something which is the managed Hadoop service provided by Sparks, and it provides the nice UI as well. So if you are new, you can explore the UI. Pretty much it will say that you would like to create a cluster, how many nodes, how many disks, and all those things you can specify. And before hitting a create, it will show you the command line. So if you would like to create the clusters from the command line, you can just copy that command line, and you can do it over and over again. And once you are done, what you can do is you can delete the cluster, and whenever you would like to use, you can create the cluster. So that way you can manage the, I mean, cost as well. And that's how even I'm doing. So one of the cluster I was using right after this particular session, I will going to delete that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Niraj. Are there any other questions?
Is there a possibility to create, I don't know, custom functionalities similar with Dataflow provides? I don't know. For example, in Dataflow there is those called pardo's inside the doFn inside the pardo functionality, and basically this logic that we are building there are somehow executed on multi-threading basically, or multiple nodes. Is there such possibility?
So first of all, I'm not familiar with the data flow, so maybe I will not be able to comment on that. However, if you can use the custom functionality, yes, absolutely, you can create the custom functionalities in terms of the classes or in terms of the UDFs, which is the user-defined functions, and you can definitely leverage that in parallel.
Okay, and also one other question regarding the streaming, probably how this Apache Spark pipelines scale up or scale down. Is there any algorithm?
So scaling up or scaling down, I mean, if you talk about the cluster, so I believe that has a different strategies or depending on which provider you're using, the AWS or the GCP or even in the Databricks. So I think that is something which is managed and will be handled automatically by this, but I believe there are some configurations which you can definitely tweak based on your requirement. However, I have used streaming a bit, and I mean, for me, it works pretty well because most of the operations which I'm familiar with, the batch API, work with even the structured streaming, I mean, in a pretty similar manner. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a way to use machine learning together with these data sets somehow and produce some results?
Yes, absolutely. So like it provides the machine learning libraries as well. So what you can do is, for example, you read your, let's say the streaming data, batch data, and you have formatted the data, I mean, the way you wanted, you have joined both the data, and in order to build the machine learning models, you have done the feature engineering and created the data in a way the machine learning models likes. So what you can do is once you have done with the entire ETL pipeline, you can save your final result to some sort of data sources, be it a Hive table or any sort of file. Then what you can do is you can read that particular data and you can fed that particular data to the Spark machine learning pipelines. And you can build the model, you can evaluate the model. There are a lot of different functions available. Even if you would like to use the other machine learning libraries like TensorFlow or Keras, you can absolutely use that along with the Spark as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Are there any more questions? If not, thank you, Niraj, very much. And we'll hope to see you at some next meetups.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I hope
yeah,
you find it useful and somewhat informative. And I hope you got something out of this particular 1 hour which you have given for this particular presentation.
yes, exactly. It was very, very interesting, and probably we'll try to use some of this and implement in our ETL pipelines.
Yep. Yep. Thank you very much, Neeraj. Really helpful. I will definitely will try to let you know how this goes, migrating from, everything from Python into, like Spark based and GCP and all the CI/CD stuff. Yeah, I'll keep you posted. Thank you very much, Neeraj.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you all. I also want to thank the Informal School of IT for helping us with this meetup, and with all the other meetups they helped us in the past. And I still expect you at next meetups. And yeah, let's all be safe until then and healthy. Thank you, Niraj, very much. I'll provide the link on the event on the Meetup platform.
Yeah. Thanks, Sergey.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.